Thank you. And with a build-up like that, I feel I'm almost bound to disappoint you guys. I'm not sure I'll be able to answer all the questions that you have raised with respect to resolving the world's problems, but I'll do my best. Thank you, really, everyone, for coming. I'm deeply honored to be giving this lecture. Very conscious that I follow a long line of very eminent speakers, eloquent experts, respected professionals, development economists, heads of state, academics, writers, dazzling careers and credentials. So as a high school dropout and a carpenter and a simple social entrepreneur, I fear I may fall short of the very high bar that they've set for me. I'm particularly wary of a man called Paul Collier, who I think has given 3 lectures. He may not agree with much of what I say concerning the potential of smallholder agriculture, but here goes anyway. I'm really going to tell you a personal story, not too much about my private life, so don't get alarmed. More about the experience and lessons learned through the course of my professional career. I'll be talking particularly about Africa and agriculture, farmers and food, livelihoods and economic empowerment, water management, and touching a little bit on climate change. But I'll be talking more about the opportunities and the problems, and about what we've learned at Kickstart concerning how best to deliver the proven solutions to the people that really need them, smallholders. And in the process, I hope to persuade you that smallholder farmers are not helpless victims of forces beyond their ability to manage, in permanent need of direct subsidy and charitable giving, as seems to be the case for a lot of farmers in Europe and America and Japan. On the contrary, African smallholders are the key to Africa's economic development, or at least a very essential key among others. And I hope you can agree that collectively these farmers form a massive reservoir of latent, seriously undervalued capital, eager and instantly ready for investment in new enterprises that add value to their existing skills and assets, that fit their current social economic circumstances and that make practical sense to them. Like most everyone else, they simply want to use their time and energy, their skills and knowledge productively to generate income, to support their families and educate their children. And at this time, they are very powerfully motivated to do exactly that, primarily because they are monetarily poor and getting poorer. So how do we mobilize this huge fund of human and social capital? Well, I contend that it's not via charity, although charity does have its place everywhere, nor is it through long-term or permanent taxpayer subsidies, but by acknowledging and approaching farmers as shrewd, realistic, resilient, resourceful investors in their futures, and by developing and delivering truly appropriate technologies and other solutions to them through market channels. Furthermore, I'm going to suggest that we can successfully tackle a set of serious global issues and challenges in the process: poverty and the increasingly inequitable distribution of wealth and opportunity, of course, but also global food security, climate change, and a host of other related concerns: environmental sustainability, water resource management, soil health, women's economic empowerment, even the delivery of educational and health services. And we can enable Africa to exercise its competitive advantage in the global market in agriculture, the one sector that has been until very recently ignored and even despised and dismissed as irrelevant and unbefitting for aspirational developing nations. So what I'm saying is that agriculture is the sleeping giant that we want to wake up now. Richard Kapuscinski visited and wrote about this colossal and complex continent in the immediate post-colonial era of 1950-2000. It's a period of false dawns, premised on a heady, ingenuous optimism and naivety, and with all its well-catalogued social and political turmoil, its famines and floods, and the spread of killer diseases, and the entrenchment of corrupt kleptocracies, and the population explosion and the ever-deepening poverty and destitution. And all this was happening as huge shifts on the geopolitical front were taking place: the end of the Cold War, globalization of business and finance, the rise of the Asian tigers and the BRICS nations, new balances of power and influence emerging, and with all the self-serving or altruistic meddling and interventions of outsiders going on. So Richard's or Kapuscinski's function as a correspondent necessarily often drove him to visit places and meet people experiencing severe trauma of one kind or another. And he commented on them very, very perceptively. I personally didn't come across his work until early this century and was duly impressed with his descriptions and commentaries, particularly those exploring the complexities and intricacies of local societies and cultures and how they affected people's responses to the inevitable changes going on around them. Much of what he wrote, of course, resonates to this day, even though the Africa that I personally know and lived in has been altogether a lot less desperate and dangerous a place than the one that he described. But I think he would have understood my initial experiences and thoughts arriving in Africa the first time in 1979 as a 25-year-old mercenary. Not a dog of war. Mercenary in the sense that I had come to spend 4 months working hard to make more money than I would have earned at the time back in London, where I had started a social enterprise, a would-be socialist cooperative, which was struggling financially and needed a cash injection. I arrived in Togo with a standard set of prejudicial presumptions and expectations fueled by the media reports on Africa, intending to do my stint there and then go back to London with the money and carry on with my big city life. 2 things I recall especially. One was a general impression. All around me, I saw busy, energetic, hardworking, inventive people getting on with their lives with seemingly very little fuss and with great good cheer, despite having very little money or technology at their disposal. The only drawback seemed that all their smarts and their hard work were used just to get by rather than to get ahead. Another was a revelatory experience, at least for me, that solved a puzzle. I'd come to Togo to build a music recording studio, some distance outside Lomé, and its design and construction required an appreciation of 3-dimensional geometry, all straight lines and angles. Very little tolerance for dimensional error if the studio was to be acoustically sound. Yet the local carpenters that I found myself working with found it supremely difficult to do this work accurately. They couldn't hammer nails in along a straight line unless I drew the line in for them. They were way off, and this sort of confounded me because in many other respects they were very skillful with a few tools that they had. Until on sort of the end of the first week, I was invited to eat lunch off-site in the local village, and we walked there. The village was visible through the trees, but the footpath leading to it was circuitous. It was not straight. And when we got there, I looked around, the roughly circular arrangement of huts, ovoid door and window openings, round-bottom clay pots on 3 stone fires, and 3-legged stools with sort of scalloped seats, and the penny dropped. I said there wasn't a straight line anywhere to be seen. So I was, this struck me. I was at first put out by that, and later with my interactions with the managers that I had to talk with, their tendency to take the conversation off course, apparently off course, down diversions and circuits, until I found that eventually we would get back to the nub of it, and that they had the end in mind all along. So I was fascinated by this, because I come from a culture which is sort of straight line mentality. While a straight line may be the shortest way between 2 points, it isn't always the best way to get from one to the other. And I offer that as a sort of amateur observation. always prepared to work things out from first principles. This propensity for elliptical or lateral out-of-the-box thinking has proven immensely valuable in the days since Kapuscinski wrote about Africa. In this new century, with the recent development and dissemination of truly appropriate technologies and higher levels of literacy and education too, the qualities of curiosity and inventiveness and adaptability have led to some amazing new innovations and developments coming out of Africa itself. The tremendous changes in ways of doing business now made possible by easy, convenient access to digital information, communications technology, mobile telephony in particular, and social media networks, have been accelerated by the proliferation of new applications and platforms developed in Africa. The M-Pesa mobile money transfer and the Ushahidi crowdsourcing mapping are two examples from Kenya that are being adopted and emulated worldwide. Marry these high-tech advances up with new agricultural technologies and wonderful things can happen. Anyway, I was thrilled by what I found and learned in Togo in 1979. In Africa, it seemed to me, was a chaotic profusion of exciting possibilities. So in 1982, I took a posting with the VSO, found myself living and working in deep rural western Kenya. 2.5 years, fetching my water from a well, cooking on a charcoal stove, using paraffin lamps and pit trees. No mobile phones, no personal computers nor internet, clunky wind-up telephone line at the local school office, government-controlled radio channels. There were independent local newspapers cautiously critical of the government, and they had advantage of expensive shortwave radio to pick up the BBC, and I had a nice motorbike which I could use to get to the nearby town. So I wasn't completely cut off from the world beyond, but my neighbors, smallholder farming families, lived without a lot of regular connections to the wider world. Everything depended on the weather, on the rain. Extended families lived on their own farms and focused their lives around food security. Their goal was to grow enough maize to put in the granary and consume until the next harvest, and maybe have some surplus to sell. Some sugarcane was grown as a cash crop, expected to bring in occasional lump sums, and there would likely be vegetables and chickens to eat or to sell. And the extended family would usually boast 1 or 2 members working in urban areas who would send small cash remittances from time to time. And although by no means a sort of lap of luxury existence, but under a centralized command economy with prices controlled by the state and some basic essential services provided freely, like primary education, school feeding and milk, and curative and preventive health services, life was sort of okay for them. It's certainly easier and better then than it has now become for those people. Anyway, I busied myself training teenagers in carpentry and building skills and in small enterprise management, and it was absorbing. I had to organize everything from scratch, right from designing and building our workshops to developing and teaching the syllabus, finding contract work for the trainees to generate income to the institution. But I grew troubled by the thought that I might not be doing the right thing, because the market was already saturated with these things. Supply of tables and chairs and simple buildings already exceeded demand. So if my trainees succeeded in winning an order, it was almost certainly at the expense of some other carpenters. The displacement effect, the sort of zero-sum result. And this is a concern, incidentally, I raised much later when there was overexcitement and hyperbole about the impact of microfinance on poor people, where I suspect there are a lot of I win, you lose scenarios. Anyway, while I haven't contributed a lot as a volunteer, my 2.5 years in rural Kenya did teach me a lot about how farmers live and behave, about their attitudes and their perceptions, and that they are more risk minimizing than profit maximizing in their decisions and actions. Better a bird in hand than 2 in the bush. And they're conservative and they're cautious in their outlook, like farmers tend to be everywhere. Because a wrong move can have a serious consequence for people who live as they do. If things don't work out, it's not a question of cancelling their holiday in Cyprus this year. It means hunger and deprivation at worst until next time around. And people there in rural areas are also deeply sensitive to what the neighbours might think, right? They'll be very reticent about doing anything that might attract the derision of their fellows. And this can inhibit the adoption of new ideas. So that was that, and I followed 6 years working for a very large development NGO, and that was another salutary experience. Plenty of good intentions, lots of money, donor money to spend, and 100 different projects going on, beguiling pictures of happy people to publish in Sunday magazines in Europe and raise more funds. Well, I worked in the shanties of Nairobi for a while, for a year, and then I moved very far away to live in a town at the very end of the country's tarmac road system and to work among nomadic pastoralists. They were community projects. That was the way of things. Low-cost building materials production, school and clinic construction, youth groups, women's groups, men's groups, training of trainers, rapid rural appraisals, community wells, community water pumps, etc. You know, it was all really fun, actually, but it wasn't working, or at least it wasn't working very well. Projects collapsed almost every time whenever the NGO tried to hand over. And we asked ourselves why. Why? My new friend, Martin Fisher, and I. Martin had arrived in Kenya from the US with a doctorate in mechanical engineering design and a profound belief, which I shared, in technology as the key to economic and social development. And we've been working well together and seemed to have complementary skills. One thing he noted was that a lot of the tools and equipment we were using in our programs were poorly made and prone to breakage and heavy use, and a case of good concept but bad design. So we worked on improving the technologies, making the block presses, the oil presses, the donkey carts, the tools, the plows, the harrows better, stronger, lighter, cheaper, easier to make locally, so that they would be durable and reliable. One of them, a block press. And we trained local artisans to produce them. But alas, there was some, but no appreciable improvement in the results. Most projects would fall apart all the same. Well, an Einstein definition of madness is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So Martin and I looked at the characteristics of the few projects that did not fail after the NGO left. These were the ones that were hijacked, taken over by enterprising individuals in the community who went on to point to sort of manage them like businesses. And they had a vested interest in maintaining them, like the community water pump, newly fenced off by the owner of the land on which it was installed. So you want this water? You pay me for it. It's an interesting example of a public utility operated by the private sector. Whereas the main characteristic of the failed community projects was that no one felt or exercised any ownership of them. They belonged to everyone and no one. And in any case, they hadn't required any serious investment of money, nor even emotion on the part of the members of the groups, which had probably formed at the encouragement of the NGO just for the free t-shirt and the seminars which promised certificates of attendance, lunch, tea, and per diems. So no one risked or lost anything if the pump broke down. Easy come, easy go. So we reported to senior management our revelation, our findings. We found the enemy, sir, and it's us. Charitable giveaways, other than to the destitute or the landless or in disaster relief situations, do not help much, if at all. Giving things away costs money, is blatantly unfair, and it's unsustainable. It's ineffective because the beneficiary has not invested and therefore does not value and protect the new asset very keenly. And worse still, it's destructive. Handouts diminish the recipient's sense of self-worth, and reinforce beggar mentalities, fatalism, and dependency. Crafty members of the community learn the new ropes and manipulate the NGO program to their personal advantage, subverting its goals. The local economy quickly grows dependent on the continued inflow of resources occasioned by the NGO's intervention. Well, this can look good at first, but it has a lot of trouble staying afloat when the NGO declares success and retires from the scene. So often, more harm is done than good. So we thought, surely there is a better way to use our smarts and our goodwill and donor money. Around this time, 89, 90, big things were happening, as I mentioned earlier, on the international development aid and budget support front. The wall came down, Soviet Union broke up, Cold War thawed, globalization went viral. It was no longer useful or politically acceptable to support the autocrats and dictators in Africa. So Dr. Donor prescribed Thatcherite, sorry, these are actually friends of mine, I hope they'll forgive me, structural adjustment programs for everyone. Swallow this or else. Remove your subsidies, throw open your markets, get government out of business, privatize. Get rid of the parastatals, do away with price controls. This is strong medicine, indeed, and African governments had to take it reluctantly or readily. And actually, at the macro level, it does seem to have helped. Certainly, it has worked for a few people. Africa is now really starting to perform macroeconomically. A lot of upbeat statistics show these improvements, and you know, this is the sort of message that we're seeing all the time now. Don't know if you can all see that. How Africa can rule the 21st century. These are the sort of headlines we're starting to see from the optimists. But you know, what did all this structural adjustment stuff mean for my friends and neighbors in rural Kenya? Those smallholder farmers and all their 500 million counterparts in other parts of the continent. It meant the end of the world as they knew it. Almost overnight, the benefits of the command economy evaporate. No more price controls and subsidies, all gone, so essential items like cooking oil quadrupled or quintupled in price. No more free school lunches and milk, no more free medication at the clinic. And that's how 500 million people at the time, the people who were least prepared for this adjustment, woke up to find themselves in a cash economy, where they suddenly needed 5 or 10 times more money than they'd ever had before, simply to stay in the same place. But there were no jobs on offer for them. They had to make this money out of their one and only asset, that is their land, a shrinking asset because of population expansion. So belatedly, the international community acknowledged this side effect of their prescribed treatment and funded projects to alleviate the social costs of adjustment. Alleviating poverty. Alleviating means lightening the load, which indicates that you accept poverty and merely want to make it easier for the poor to bear it. Was how visionary is that? Over 20 years later, and most families have still not recovered from this shock. Rural people in Africa have tougher lives now than they did then. Things have not improved, lives got harder, and the gap between the have-a-lots and the have-nots has widened. But that was then, and the timing for me and Martin was very apt, because for anyone, rich or poor, to make more productive use of an asset, the right technology is required. So we set up Kickstart in July '91 under its original name, APROTEC, which meant appropriate technologies for enterprise creation, which is why we capitalized the EC at the end. And we told anyone who cared to listen that we were going to develop technologies for the poorest people on the planet and sell them. People laughed. Selling capital equipment to the poorest of the poor was clearly a lunatic adventure. And sure enough, it proved very difficult at first. We were very good at the technology design part, but not so good at getting them out there. We struggled for a while, attempting to disseminate them through ongoing NGO and government development programs with limited success, until we asked ourselves, well, how does Toyota do it? Or Coca-Cola? And the breweries of Procter & Gamble, how do they get their staff into the remotest African village and sell it at a profit and do well? But the answer is actually very simple. Go to the market. Ensure supply, create demand. Understand your customers' values, and build a brand and back it up. Don't approach poor people with the proposition that you are poor and this is for you, because they'll run a mile. Find out what they really dream about and show how your solution will help them achieve that dream. All our products now are branded and called Money Maker, because that's what poor people dream about, money. They know that they live in a market economy where sufficient purchasing power enables them to convert their basic needs into market demands. And if you want and can pay for education and health services, the market will oblige you by delivering them. It's not rocket science. But, you know, it's not just about poverty eradication. It's about wealth creation for a country and a continent, and by extension, I hope, the wider world. Big picture. The big picture. We've already heard that the current 7 billion people in the world are going to be 9 billion in the next 30 or 40 years. Africa's population is going to double from 1 to 2 billion. And already, a great many of these people go to bed hungry. So of course we need to produce and store and process and transport a lot more food. So there's the solution, at least in my view. Look how big Africa is, illustrated on the slide there. We've got a lot of land, and a lot of it is very idle, it's underutilized or not utilized at all. It has a lot of people, and they're almost all of them are like 15, 18 years old, you know. They're young and they're eager and they want to get ahead. And contrary to perception, there's a lot of water. It's not evenly distributed, but think that 97% of the rain that falls on Africa is straight into the ocean, carrying with it topsoil. 97%. Technology, well, I've alluded to that already. We have a lot of technologies now, wonderful new technologies in biogenetics, better seeds, better soil health products, better crop protection products. And in communications and information, we have mobile phones, voice, text, and data. Smartphones are getting smarter and cheaper, and they're getting everywhere. So, you know, on the one hand, there's a guaranteed and growing demand in the world for food, and on the other, there's a potential source of supply and the technologies to make it happen. So what is the problem? Apart from the fact that in Kapuscinski's era, very few movers and shakers really gave agriculture a thought. And even now, in the new digital age, it's not a sexy subject. Farming is still a big yawn for most of us. Well, green revolutions have taken place everywhere else. Since 1960, yields per acre in Europe, America, China, India have all multiplied 4, 5, 6 times. But not in Africa, it's multiplied by 1. How come? There's a lot of reasons. Surely there's a lack of timely and accurate market information for farmers to plan with. There's the non-availability of seeds and fertilizers and other inputs, including rural finance. Inadequate infrastructure, roads, post-harvest storage, poor organization and management of farmer associations and cooperatives, the reliance on biblical age tools, hand hoes and machetes, obstructive administrative and legal structures, weak linkages to market, and lack of local value-adding industries. Where are the chocolate factories in Ghana? What's really difficult about setting up warehouse receipting and agricultural commodity exchanges? So there are some exceptions, and there are a huge number of pretty picture demonstration projects peppering the continent. But by and large, the fact remains that the African farmer is not only unsupported, but penalized. The poorest people on the planet are not just left to cope on their own. They're taxed. So there are a lot of obstacles to remove before Africa can really rise to the challenge. But there are some fundamental problems that we can work on very, very quickly. One stands out very starkly: water irrigation. 55% of Asian Indian agriculture is irrigated. They may have some environmental costs and concerns around that, but that's not so in Africa, where 97% of agricultural production is still rain-fed. 3% is irrigated. And in this era of climate change, rainfall patterns are unreliable, erratic, and they make farming an ever more risky business. Rain-fed agriculture also means we have a feast-famine production cycle totally out of whack with demand. Everyone harvests at the same time and therefore fetches very low prices. And because infrastructure is so poor, 30–40% of the food is lost. Later, between the harvests, food prices go through the roof. So it's a double whammy for a poor farmer. You don't produce much, you don't get very much for it, and then you can't afford the inputs when the next season comes around, so you're kept down. Well, and in many parts of Africa, there's only one rainy season, one cycle. So that means that nothing happens for 8 months out of 12. And even when there are 2 rainy seasons, you're still idle for 4 months out of 12. So water management irrigation does seem to provide an answer to that, or a partial answer. If it enables you, as it does, to mitigate the risks of dependency on the weather and to grow more food, and high value food, high value in market terms, and high value in nutritional terms as well, and increase rural incomes household incomes by 300% or 400% or more, why are we not falling over ourselves to do it? Is it the expense, or the technical complexity, the environmental sensitivity? Most people think of irrigation and water catchment in terms of very large, capital-intensive dams and flood and furrow irrigation schemes costing $5,000 to $10,000 per irrigated hectare or more. But water management need not be like that. We have developed water-conserving, more crop per drop technologies. Irrigation technologies that need very little technical skills to install and use, and which only cost 1/10 or 1/20 of conventional irrigation schemes, and which do not threaten the environment or suck aquifers dry because they use renewable water resources. And they're ideal for smallholders. A couple of examples are there. Some people may know about micro-drip systems and things. Water is food. And our problem, of course, is that there's exactly the same amount of water on the planet as there has ever been. It just goes round and round and round somehow. There's just more people to use it, so we obviously have to use it more efficiently. But there's another problem too. It doesn't stand out yet, but it'll come to plague us soon enough, and that is soil health and soil fertility. Yields have increased so dramatically in some other parts of the world due to the liberal and often heavily subsidized application of chemical fertilizers. And the more we use, the more we need them. It's like a drug addiction. But in the longer term, these tend to destroy soil health, and they kill nutrients and leave the soil useless by itself for growing anything. And part of the reason that African smallholder yields remain so low is because they've not had access or cannot afford these types of fertilizer. Perhaps this will turn out in time to be a blessing in disguise, because as with irrigation, there are new and better and cheaper technologies emerging. These are microbial soup fertilizers. I could go on about them for some time, but I don't think I have it. But they are probiotic soil health products. So they enrich and restore the soil, even as they help to reduce crop cycles and improve yields. But we don't see them being used much yet. And that is the fundamental issue. The people who could really benefit from these new products and solutions either don't know about them or cannot get them, at a place which is convenient to them and at a price which is affordable. And in most cases, they don't fully understand the value of them either. And this is where Kickstart comes in, tries to come in. We want to build a bridge between the proven effective solutions and those who can apply them. Well, we have a mission, like every good organization, is to get as many people out of poverty as possible, quickly, sustainably, and to change the way that development is done. And our guiding principle, thanks to John Stuart Mill, is the greatest good to the largest number in the shortest time at least cost. This principle guides almost all our resource allocation decisions. And we want, of course, to create economic growth and employment, social and political development. So that's all very nice, very noble, but how? Our strategy is simple, I've alluded to it. We design and develop productivity-enhancing technologies for people at the bottom of the pyramid, and we develop the market channels by which these solutions reach them. So we design, produce, distribute, market, sell, and we monitor the economic and social impacts of the program. Some of our technologies have proven more impactful than others. And our most successful product or solution is this thing you see there, sorry, on the screen there, the Moneymaker pump. There's a human-powered pressure irrigation pump. It's cheap, it's easy to install and use, and it enables peasant farmers to transform from a subsistence survivalist lifestyle at the mercy of the elements into commercial farmers, consciously managing their farms. 400% to 500% increase in productivity and incomes are common. This elevates them from below the poverty line to well above it on the path to prosperity. When we say out of poverty, what we mean by that is that a family should have enough money not simply to meet its essential needs of shelter and food and education and health, but it will have a surplus. It will have a discretionary income left over, enough to plan and build their futures. So that's the characteristic of all our technologies. They intended to help the user make money, not to save money, because if you haven't got any money, you can't save it. Nor even necessarily to save time, because the time is not the big constraint. A lot of people don't actually have much to do with their time. Anyway, there are plenty of other hugely important design criteria behind an apparently simple machine like this, and that one is very high energy efficiency. A human being can only produce about 75 watts, and how you convert that puny amount into something economically viable. It's got to be durable. It's going to be used out there in the middle of the beyond, you know. It has to last for 4 years or 5 before it is finished. It has to be portable, compact, weigh a certain less than 20 kilos. It has to be very simple to install. It's got to be sort of plug and play. You can't have a technical expert to come along and do it for you. The farmer must be able to go to the store, buy the thing, go home, set it up himself or herself and start using it. Have to use it, be able to maintain it without any tools. People don't have tools, you know. Not even the screwdrivers. You have to do it with your bare hands. There's no bolts, there's no screws, there's nothing to work loose, and it has to be low cost. An illustrative story, Felix and Lucy. Felix is there in the picture. He grew up in rural Kenya, the 7th son of a peasant farmer, primary school education, went to seek his fortune in the big city like many do. Ended up as a waiter in a local eatery, and he earned $40 a month. He lived in the shanties, and he didn't have really anything left over to send to his young wife back home. It was a bad life. But Felix saw how much the owner of the restaurant was paying for the vegetables delivered to the door, and he wished he was the one supplying them because he knew how to grow them. And he went home one weekend, and he saw a live demonstration of the Moneymaker pump in his local market. He saw how it could help a farmer to water a larger plot with little effort, and he persuaded his family members to lend him the cash to buy one and to rent a 1/4 acre, which he put under cabbages and leafy greens. 3 months later, this was in 2006, he cashed $500 from his first sale. And if you visit Felix and his wife Lucy now, they own their own land. They've built and furnished a permanent house. They send their children to a good school. They employ 5 people, and they're expanding and diversifying their family business. And they make around $1,500 per month on average. From poverty and deprivation to prosperity, all on their own initiative. No charity, no group, just recognizing and seizing an opportunity that came their way through the market. Well, how exactly did it come through the market to Felix and Lucy's? And again, there's no mystery. There's just a lot of careful logistics and organization, which the Toyotas and the Coca-Colas of this world know much about. First, it has to be designed and developed, of course, but once that's done, it has to be manufactured, and then from the factory, the pump shipped to the wholesaler distributor and onto the retailer, with everyone making their legitimate markup on the way through. But that's just the delivery. It didn't sell itself. It had to be demonstrated to Felix and marketed and promoted, and its value persuasively articulated. First, local language shortwave radio ads to create awareness and stimulate interest among people to come to a certain place at a certain time, a public venue to learn and to see, to try it out themselves. Leaflets, flyers, brochures are distributed, loudspeaker announcements on the day itself. And when the people do gather, sales pitches are delivered. Questions are asked and answered, assurances and guarantees are offered regarding its performance, durability, and the availability of spare parts and service. And finally, a sale is transacted. It's pretty much the same way that a car may be sold in a wealthy country. Well, all this marketing and promotion is very expensive. And the costs of this cannot be immediately written into the price structure of the pump, or it would be prohibitive price for the farmer. So this is where the investment of smart subsidy is made. You know, to launch a brand new product into the marketplace requires a lot of very costly marketing activity. And at first, losses are made with each sale. But as the awareness builds, and the demand rises, the sales increase, and the marketing costs per sale diminish. And the product becomes familiar, well-known, appreciated and valued to the extent that it is no longer necessary to spend a lot of money marketing it. In fact, it becomes profitable to sell it, and that begins to attract competition into this same marketplace as other people make copies and improvements and start to compete in the market with you, which is exactly what we're aiming for, is to create a brand new industry. And this is what we're seeing with moneymaker pumps. And the sales are reaching the numbers at the scale where heartwarming stories like Felix and Lucy's aggregate together to form a macroeconomically significant impact. We've sold 214,000 of these pumps, and that's resulted in nearly 140,000 successful rural farm enterprises. It's taken nearly 700,000 people out of poverty, and these new enterprises generate close to $120 million in net household income increases. So that's new wealth created in rural economies. And for every dollar of subsidy or smart subsidy used, and it's used for the research and development and for the marketing and the impact evaluation, $15 of new wealth is generated by the farmers. So you've got an economic return on investment of 15 to 1. Expressed as a cost per person out of poverty, that's $65. $65. That's all it has cost us to end one person's poverty and dependence forever. So, you know, some nice numbers there, but just a hint still of what could be. If only we could use methodologies like this to get solutions like the moneymaker to the millions of people who need them. This map is courtesy of the International Water Management Institute, and what it does, it shows the poverty reduction potential of agricultural water management solutions. The greener it is on the map, the higher the potential for these solutions to reduce or eradicate poverty. So, currently, we reckon that, well, we're not reckon, it's a pretty good guess, that over 18 million families, that's about 90 million people, which is about 10% of sub-Saharan Africa's population, live in places where renewable surface and shallow groundwater sources can be tapped for water and irrigation. But only less than 1% of them are doing this now. And again, it's because they don't know or fully appreciate the value of them, or they can't get them. Think about that, because actually it's a tendency, particularly in agricultural economies, for people to congregate and live where water is on or near the surface. That's why they go there. And when they go there, because they go there, that's where the infrastructure develops. That's where the markets are. So as much as we look at the sort of desert areas where the populations per square kilometre are very, very low, it seems to me that the priority needs to be on the places which are heavily and densely populated, because that's where the solutions lie. So the same logic as I've just used, if you agree with it, on irrigation applies to soil health products. And here the numbers are even higher. It's more 100% of rural families live in places where the judicious application of soil restorative fertilizers can help them increase yields and incomes. So anyway, some final mathematics to fire the imagination. If we just get 18 million smallholder farmers to increase their production 5 times, as in the green revolutions of Asia, we'll achieve a 50% increase in Africa's food production. Imagine what that would do to resolve the food security challenge, and what it would do for African economies, which are still largely dependent on agriculture, and what it would do in terms of poverty eradication and all that follows from it. The economic empowerment of women like Lucy, the demand and supply of education and health services for her family, and the wider stimulation of new enterprise and economic activity. And, well, you know, I hope you're not disappointed, because that's it really. That's actually how I believe we can waken this sleeping giant. But if you'll allow me just a couple more observations in closing. If all this strikes you as a bit simplistic an argument, please consider a couple of what I hope are important points. One is that while situations and problems are often complex and tangled, the solutions can be surprisingly simple once you identify the right point to unravel the knot. Sometimes, if we come across a Gordian knot too dense to unpick, we find a way of simply cutting through it. That's the answer to it. The second, perhaps more serious point, is bottleneck theory, or the theory of constraints. It's immensely useful when looking for the most effective intervention, and also has the advantage of simplicity, and it holds that almost any process or system may be impeded by a variety of bottlenecks along the way. But it doesn't do any good to work at the secondary or tertiary bottlenecks and expect to make a systemic improvement. You have to identify and remove or widen the primary or tightest bottleneck first before you go on to the others. And finally, because so often the magnitude of a challenge can be daunting and the resources we have to address is so limited, is a suggestion for those who allocate those resources and have to make choices. They may help to think of 4 critical success factors which we have labeled at Kickstart as real good, not feel good. One is impact. Are you promising, or are you achieving real, measurable, visible impacts, whatever they are? You know, are household incomes increasing? Is the incidence of malaria decreasing, or whatever? Those you have to be able to see and measure. If you can't measure them, then maybe they're not there. Second is cost effectiveness. Again, this is really a leverage question, leveraging results over resources. How much value do you create for the amount of money? Because you've got a lot of choices. I can put my dollar here, there, or everywhere. But what's going to bring the biggest bang for buck? The third is an exit strategy. The big S word, sustainability, that is bandied around a lot. What does it really mean? We think it means one of 4 things. Either it's sustainable because it becomes profitable in the manner that I've just described, or it becomes sustainable because the host government understands and accepts that this methodology is successful and takes it up, or perhaps at a more local level the community will take it over. Or else you eradicate the problem. We've had a sustainable solution to smallpox. There isn't any. So that's the third one. And the last one is the model scalable or replicable? Is this something that, or if it works at a local small level, can it be scaled up or replicated out? If the answer to all 4 questions is yes, then you can achieve large scale and lasting change. So there, that is my Kapuscinski lecture. I've got it in 3 slides. I know I showed 40 and I talked for a long time, but this is really it. That's one. There's the population. We got the land, we got the farmers, we got the technology, we got the water. We have a perfect opportunity. A crisis can become an opportunity. These are the challenges. Last mile delivery. I didn't emphasize that point enough, perhaps, but it was a very important part, you know, that last mile. And there are the solutions. So, you want to take a picture? So, Asante, thank you very much.